Hello Otters, how are you today? Kano here. I've been making watercolor paints for about a month now, and I'm finally kind of quite comfortable with my setup and stuff, so I wanted to share with you the basic tools you're gonna need if you want to give this a go. Watercolor paint making is great fun, and it's a great way to learn more about your paints, and what better than to be able to make your own paints and then paint with those paints. But it can be really overwhelming to start off with and quite scary. And when you look at specialist shops, they have all the tools, sure, but they are so expensive, which makes starting paint making really hard. You know, what if you just want to give it a go, just find out if you like it or not. You're not going to spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds getting all the gear. So today I am going to show you my watercolor paint making setup, and also show you where you can save some money for yourself. Watercolor is made out of two things. One is a pigment and the other is a binder. So the first thing you're going to need is some pigments, and pigments are just very finely ground powders of various things. It can be mineral, it can be organic, it could be synthetic. Pigments vary in price vastly. Some of them are going to be like 3-4 euros for a bag like this, whereas like lapis lazuli, you're talking about 3 figures for a small like pot of the pigment. So I would definitely recommend starting off with the cheap end of the pigments. So a lot of the synthetics and the earth pigments are a lot more affordable, so that you can just get used to the process of making watercolor paints. There are several places you can get pigments from. Crema is a really well-known one that I think a lot of paint makers use. They have a really wide range of pigments. Cornelisons is another good pigment supplier. They are based in London. I actually went to a university practically next to them, and I used to go right past their shop every day, and I never thought I'd be getting pigments from them myself. So it's really awesome that I get to play with their pigments as well. They don't have as much selection as Crema does, but they do also have some very unique ones, like the original manganese blue, which I think they're literally like the only people that still have them in stock. So there's Crema, there's Cornelisons. I know there's another good shop called Kano in Canada, if you're based in Canada, and there are several places in the US. So I will leave a list of good websites, or websites that come highly recommended, down in the description below. Pigments can come in bags, or just like these, or even in paper bags. I don't think this is as practical, and sometimes you have a choice of whether it's going to come in a jar or a bag, and sometimes you just get what you get. With your pigments sorted, the next thing you're going to need are the binders. Now, watercolor paint uses gum arabic as the binder, but just to simplify things right at the beginning, I highly recommend using a ready-made mixture that all you need to do is put the pigment and the binder together, and that's all you have to worry about. And then once you get used to that, you can start creating your own binder mixtures as well. I've tried 2 pre-mixed binders so far. One is from Schmincke and the other one is from Crema. What kind of binder you go for is totally up to you. The biggest difference between these two is that Crema has honey in it. The Schmincke one doesn't have honey in it, and honey has to do with how easily your paint is going to re-wet. So if you put honey in, it's going to have great re-wettability, but also it means it's going to take a lot longer for the paint to dry if you want it in a pan. Schmincke's one doesn't have honey in, but it also has very good re-wettability as well. Schmincke's one also has oxgall, which is the thing that makes your pigment really move in a puddle of water, whereas Crema's one doesn't have oxgall in it. So I recommend trying at least a couple of different binders to see what kind of things you personally look for in the paints you're making. and that way you get to try out, you know, oxgall and honey and stuff without worrying too much about ratios and how to mix everything together. It's all done for you. Once you get used to it and once you know what you're doing with the paint making side of things, then you can totally go freestyle and start creating your own binder mixes. So that was what goes in the paints. Let's now talk about the peripheral stuff that you're going to need in order to make paints. The first thing you're going to need is something to make the paint on. When you're mixing the paint, you're going to need to mold. I'm sure you've seen me do it in my live stream. And that needs to be a non-porous flat surface. When you're starting out, I know Eve from Eve Bolt started off doing it on a plate, and that's totally fine as well. But if you want a large surface area, I highly recommend piece of toughened glass. You can get mulling glass panel from places like Cornelisons and Kremer, but they're incredibly expensive. A piece this size is about 50 euros. So whereas I bought this one for £6, which I know this currency conversions, it's still a lot cheaper. This is a piece of glass chopping board, and the reason why it's great is because it is toughened glass, and I personally feel better using toughened glass because you're going to be pressing down quite a lot with your muller, and so I don't really want things shattering too easily. It's a nice thick chopping board. The only thing you need to do with a chopping board to turn it into a mulling board is that they do come with little silicone feet in the corners, and you just need to remove them. You can just scrape that off. If you don't remove the feet, then you're gonna have this plate slightly raised, which when you press down with a glass muller, you're in danger of shattering the glass plate. You just want a flat piece of glass, preferably toughened. You can also use other non-porous surfaces such as a slab of marble if you have that. Because you're going to be pressing down and moving it a lot, if you just plonk a piece of glass or whatever onto your table, it's going to slip and slide. So you want to have something that can securely hold your mulling surface to the table. And the solution I found is this thing. It's from IKEA, and it's those things you put under your rug to stop the rug from moving. And I got this from IKEA. The product is called Stop, and this was £1.80 for a massive roll. It's 67.5 by 200 centimeters, so you're gonna have more than plenty. And you just need to put a sheet of that under here, and that is gonna securely hold on to your glass plate. I can literally wobble the table before this thing isn't gonna move anywhere. You can also use things like silicone mats. Bath mats, the non-slip bath mats would work perfectly as well. You just want something silicone-y that is designed for stopping things from sliding, and that would work great. Now that you have the surface, you need something to mix the paint and the binder together, and what you're going to need is a glass muller. This is one of the products that I personally went and bought a professional one rather than trying to thrift a alternative because it was just easier. And I started off with this little glass muller that I got from Kremer, and this is plenty, really. And this was 12 euros, so very affordable stuff for a professional piece of tool. The only downside with this little one is that because you hold it like this and you're doing this a lot, it's quite tiring on the fingers. So I did upgrade to a bigger one that you can grip better, so that your hand and your fingers don't get as tired. Which one you go for is entirely up to you. I have also seen people use things like a glass candle holder that has a flat bottom. You just want something that is flat and round and preferably non-porous. But I personally feel that this was worth just investing in a professional piece of tool. The next thing you're definitely going to need to do is to protect your lungs, and you can do that quite easily with a breathing mask. Make sure it's a good one. And I have seen like other videos that go, oh, you should wear a breathing mask, but I'm only doing a little bit, so I'm not going to wear one. Please don't do that. It's just not good for you. You don't know exactly what those pigments are going to do. Some of the pigments are definitely toxic. I mean, I recommend you start off with a non-toxic one. But even like the non-toxic ones, you don't know what it's doing to your lungs and your body. So please always use a breathing mask when there are loose powders about. Once you've mixed the dry pigment with the binder, so there's no loose pigment powders flying around anymore, then you can take your mask off. But while you have loose pigments flying about, please wear a good breathing mask. And then these are a few other things I have in my setup that I found quite useful, that you might find useful, but you definitely don't need all of them, and I'm sure you can find alternative ways of making things even cheaper as well. The first tools that I definitely use a lot, as in every time I make paints, is 2 measuring spoons. One is 1 tablespoon and the other is 1 teaspoon. I do recommend that you get a measuring spoon that is specifically you're going to use for paint making and not mixed with cooking for safety. And I did buy a whole set of measuring spoons, but these 2 are the only ones I've needed so far. The tablespoon is for measuring the pigment, and the teaspoon is for measuring out your pre-mixed binder. Next thing you're going to need is some palette knives. You don't need 2, but I find having these 2 together to be incredibly handy. This one is for mixing the pigment and the binder right at the beginning, and this one is for scraping the paint that is on the glass. A lot of people do make with just this, but I find this saves a lot of time as well, and it also means you can scrape the paint off each palette knife quite nicely. And this one is ideal for pouring paint into little half pans and full pans, and this is also ideal for pouring paint into bigger containers like jars, because you can just get more on to your palette in one go and just pour it in. I will leave links down below to all the products that I've shown you in this video. And these tools do not have to be expensive at all. They're all very affordable. I just went for the cheapest options out there. So you've finished making the paints, you're going to need something to put the paints into. And there are lots of different options. The standard one obviously is to put them in pans, and these are half pans and these are full pans, and you can get them from a lot of art supply stores. I get them either from Jackson's or from Kremer, because you can buy them in bulk that way. And then once you put paints on and dry, they just look like this and very neat. Another good alternative for containers is just little jars like this, or even big jars like this if you need a big amount of paint like I do. This is a 60ml and this is a 20ml. Normally when I make a batch of pigments from 1 tablespoon of pigment, I find 20ml is plenty to hold the entire batch. Now finally, this tool, which is a spray bottle, definitely you don't need, but very handy if you have one. I've filled this up with distilled water, and distilled water is the way to go if you need to add any water to your paint, because it has the least amount of impurities in them. I do know that in some areas the tap water in their area will react very weirdly with watercolor paints, and of course you don't want lots of impurities going in there, so distilled water is a great way to go, and you can get them either from a pharmacy or from Amazon. And you don't have to have it in a spray bottle, but the reason why I put it in is because then when I have the paint spread out everywhere, I can just use the spray and I can evenly put some water in there without having to then scrape it all back in and mix it again. So optional, but definitely useful. So that is it for the tools you are going to need to make your own watercolor paints. I know this feels like a lot of tools to get, but you can definitely get them so much cheaper, fraction of what the pigment sellers are selling you as the paint making tools. The only professional tool that I bought was the glass muller, and if you're lucky enough to find something that is round glass and flat, then you don't even need to do that. You can definitely DIY bootstrap this thing without paying an awful lot of money for what they are selling as a professional paint making tools. I hope you enjoyed this video. As I said before, I will leave links down below to all the stuff I've shown you, as well as the pigment websites that either I've used and recommend, or it comes highly recommended. If you have any questions about the tools I showed you in this video, please ask away in the comments down below. And if this video was useful to you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe and hit the notification button if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!